Yeah,
No.
but I was a 25-year-old. So once I started this company, I think I learned a few things. I learned how important communication is. Communication, with your team, with your investors, with the public. I think I learned you got to lead by example, certainly. I think I also learned that being a CEO is actually a pretty lonely job. You don't have the luxury of being able to kind of share all your fears with your management team. So what I found is, and I was really lucky because I got an investor in FirstMark, and particularly my board member Larry Lenehan, who was a great board member, a great mentor, and ended up being a great friend. And I'm learning a lot from him. I'm learning a lot from other people that I interact with. And my leadership style, I think, it's evolving. It's changing right now.
Questions from the floor, sir?
Yes. How does a buyer do due diligence on the, let's say, restricted stock and things of that nature?
So the buyers are, they're accredited, they're sophisticated. So it's kind of buyer beware market. Most of the asset classes, in fact, actually everything but private company, there's sufficient amount of information out there to do diligence. Private company is unique, and so this is why we identified the companies as being an important partner. Because there's kind of three parties. There's the buyer, the seller, and the company. So the companies that are working very closely with us, they'll provide some information to the buyers. Might be just the cap table, might be financials, might be projections, and ultimately the buyer is going to use whatever resources they have available to make a decision. The nice thing is, the market dictates the price at the end of the day. And if you do it in a transparent, competitive environment, fair market value will emerge. Now, we can't prevent things like fraud, but our filter is to trade on second market, you have to have done an institutional round. So we're hoping and assuming that the venture funds and the private equity guys are kind of providing that oversight. But at the end of the day, you can't prevent an Enron type situation.
I think I neglected to ask you an important question, like how do you make money in this?
Yes. So our model is really simple. So we decided early on that to be successful, we had to remove all the friction from these transactions. So we made it free to access our marketplace. We made it free to list assets for sale. We made it free to bid. We don't charge money for data. We don't charge anything other than a transaction fee. Plus, we do all the work. We handle all the paperwork. These are very kind of cumbersome settlement processes. So for that, we charge a transaction fee that tends to be, on average, between 2 to 5% of the dollar amount of the transaction.
Sir.
Yes.
Hey.
How's it going? Can you walk us through your decision process in determining where on the 2 to 5% spectrum you are for each of your different asset classes?
It's driven by liquidity, it's driven by spread, it's driven by the amount of work it takes to get a transaction done, and it also is driven by what the market will bear. We as a marketplace, we don't ever buy ourselves, and that's what makes us very unique from the traditional Wall Street model, where if you trade with a big bank, sometimes they're acting as an agent, sometimes they're buying, and they're basically taking as much as they can from you. So everything we do is very transparent. Our fees are very transparent, and because this is closer to a real estate transaction than it is trading common stock in the public market, people have no problem paying 2, 3, 4% for these transactions.
Sir, back against the wall.
Yeah, you make a market for illiquid assets. You talk mostly about financial securities. Or you also have, are you making a market for other asset classes that are hard assets, whether they're used equipment or things like that, excess inventory, whatever?
On our list of 80 asset classes, there's certainly things that resemble hard assets. Actual just real estate. But I think there's plenty of platforms out there that are addressing that, and so we like to be the first ones into a market. We like to be the pioneers. We want to be the ones that are figuring out, who are the buyers, what information do they need, how do you settle these transactions. So to the extent that no one's doing it, and there's a need for people to get out of it, and people want to get into it, we're going to get into it.
One of the history lessons for the last 40 or 50 years in the history of corporate strategy is that more and more of the world of business is exposed to market mechanisms. Market mechanisms are seeping into maybe countries that didn't have them before, Russia, China, but they're also seeping into markets and industries that really didn't have them before. One economist estimated, I think in 1970, that maybe 50% of American business was exposed to effective competition. Now the figure is up there around 90%, and Barry is leading the charge on making market mechanisms effective in even more sectors of the economy. Sir.
What's the difference between SecondMarket and I think it's SharePost, and if I were selling my restricted stock, why wouldn't I go to a company that just specializes in doing that, which I think SharePost does?
So SharesPost, we know the company well, and we know the management team well. Their model is their model is, I think they call themselves the Craigslist for private company stock. And you know, when people are looking to sell $1 million, $2 million, $5 million of stock, you know, they tend to want to do it through a regulated business like we are, where there's people. The SharesPost model is pure technology, and I think it's reflective in the volumes. We've done to date about $240 million in private company stock, and I believe SharesPost, last numbers I saw, was about $2.5 million.
We're only going to take a couple more questions, then we're going to let you pose your questions to Barry over a glass of wine or whatever. Sir, there.
From a buyer perspective, is there sort of what's the threshold of a transaction size?
On the private company front, it's about $1.5 million is the average transaction size. We don't have minimums, but you know, sellers tend to not want to sell $10,000 worth. They're looking to sell something, you know, something that's going to be meaningful to, you know, buy a house, buy a car. So the sellers kind of ultimately kind of dictate the average transaction size. You know, we've done transactions in private company stock of $30, $40 million, and our other asset classes, the other asset classes, things like CDOs, things like mortgage-backed securities, those trade in blocks of $50 million. And so last year, in 2009, we did about $2 billion in transactions across all of our asset classes. And this year, we could do $10 billion this year, quite frankly.
How large is the potential market, did you say? I mean, in all liquid assets?
Bloomberg says 50 trillion. Now, whether it's 50, 40, 30, 10, or 5, it's big enough that we don't have to have a whole lot of success to make a few bucks, I think.
Ma'am, last question.
It's a related question.
Okay.
How small do you have to stay before the SEC steps in?
It
says you're a public market.
So we have a great relationship with the regulators. So we're regulated. And in fact, the SEC invited me down to D.C. about 2 months ago to serve on a panel with Mary Shapiro, the SEC commissioner, to talk about the future of financial markets and innovation. So they like what we're doing because we are following the rules, and we're.
I like what you're doing.
Yeah.
I have a privately held company, and I'd like it to stay that way.
Yeah.
And this kind of a platform can help us to keep it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Thank you.
This has been great. The Executive Council has not misnamed this series. This is a rising star. And Barry, thank you very much.